First time trying human procreation. My alien princess roommate can't resist. It was an ordinary day when James first met his new roommate. He had no idea that his life was about to change in ways he couldn't imagine. The exchange program he had joined was meant to be an exciting opportunity to experience new cultures, but he never expected it to include living with an alien. When the door to their shared apartment opened, James stood frozen for a moment. Standing in front of him was a tall, elegant woman with skin that shimmered like silver. Her hair was long and white, flowing down her back in a cascade of strands that caught the light. She had striking violet eyes, unlike anything James had ever seen. She wasn't human, and it was immediately clear that she was from a different world. Her name was Lyra, and she was an alien princess from a distant planet. She had come to Earth as part of a cultural exchange, and James was chosen to be her roommate. He had heard about the program but never expected to be paired with someone so important. "Hello, James," Lyra greeted him with a soft voice, her words surprisingly clear despite her unfamiliar accent. "I am Lyra from the planet Zorath. I am honored to be your roommate." James blinked in disbelief. He had been briefed about the exchange program, but nothing prepared him for this moment. He tried to shake off the initial shock and smiled awkwardly. "It's nice to meet you, Lyra. I'm James," he said, extending his hand for a handshake. He could hardly believe he was standing in front of an alien princess, but the reality of the situation quickly sank in. Lyra tilted her head, studying his hand as though it were something foreign to her. After a moment's hesitation, she reached out and took his hand in hers, her grip firm yet delicate. There was a strange warmth to her touch, and James felt an inexplicable spark of energy flow through him. "Is this how humans greet each other?" Lyra asked, her violet eyes scanning him with curiosity. "I have read about human customs, but I am not sure I fully understand them." James chuckled nervously. "Yeah, that's the standard way to greet someone." A handshake. He pulled his hand back, suddenly feeling a little self-conscious. "So, where are you from exactly? Zorath?" Lyra nodded, a soft smile playing on her lips. "Yes, Zorath is a planet far from here. We have a different way of life, different customs. I am here to learn about your world, to understand humans better." Her gaze lingered on him, as though she were trying to read something deeper in his expression. James could feel the weight of her presence, the sheer intensity of her gaze. He wondered what it must be like to be so different, to come from a world so far removed from Earth. His mind raced with questions, but he didn't know where to start. The thought of living with her for the next few months made him both nervous and excited. "Well, welcome to Earth, I guess," James said, trying to break the silence. "We can get to know each other more over time." Lyra nodded again, her long white hair shimmering as she moved. "Yes, I would like that very much. I have many questions about humans. I have read much about your kind, but reading is different from experiencing." The conversation flowed awkwardly for the next few hours as they got to know each other. Lyra asked about everything, from human food and clothing to emotions and relationships. James did his best to explain things in simple terms, but he could tell that Lyra was still struggling to grasp certain concepts. It was clear that her species was far more advanced than humans in many ways, but they didn't seem to have the same emotional complexity that humans did. Over the next few days, Lyra immersed herself in human culture. She watched TV shows with James, read books about human history, and even tried to cook some human dishes. James was amazed at how quickly she picked things up. It was as if she could absorb information just by observing, like a sponge soaking up water. Despite her intelligence, there was something about her that felt distant. Lyra seemed to struggle with understanding human emotions, particularly when it came to relationships. She asked James countless questions about love, attachment, and intimacy, but he could only offer simple explanations. It wasn't until one evening, as they sat together in their small apartment, that she finally confided in him. "James, I do not understand," Lyra said softly, her eyes downcast. "I have read about love and relationships, but I do not understand how humans form such bonds. Why do humans seek out companionship? Why do they want to be close to one another?" James was taken aback by the question. He had never really thought about it in such deep terms. "Well, humans, we need connection. We want to feel understood, loved. It's natural to seek out someone to share our lives with." Lyra seemed to ponder this for a long time, her violet eyes focused on the floor. "In my world, relationships are not like that. We do not need others in the same way. Our species does not experience the same emotions you do. But here, I see humans seeking out these connections. Why? James paused, trying to find the right words. I guess. It's because we're social creatures. We need to feel connected to others to feel whole. Relationships bring us joy, comfort, and sometimes even pain, but it's all part of the human experience. Lyra's gaze softened as she looked at him. I do not understand it, but I think I am beginning to feel something I cannot explain. When I am near you, I feel different. Is this what humans mean when they speak of affection? James' heart skipped a beat. He didn't know how to respond. He had never considered the possibility that Lyra might feel something for him, especially not after everything she had said about her species and their lack of emotional depth. But the way she was looking at him now with those intense violet eyes made his breath catch in his throat. I think so, he said, his voice barely a whisper. I think that's what affection is. For a moment, there was silence between them, a charged stillness that hung in the air. James could feel his heart racing, unsure of what to do with the emotions bubbling up inside him. He had never imagined that living with an alien princess would lead to feelings like this. But before he could say anything more, Lyra stood up abruptly, her expression unreadable. I need to learn more. I will study human relationships further. I must understand. James watched her leave the room, feeling a mix of confusion and curiosity. He didn't know where this was heading, but he could sense that something had shifted. Lyra was no longer just an alien princess from another world. She was someone he was beginning to feel a connection with, a connection he didn't fully understand. As the days passed, their relationship grew more complex. Lyra continued to learn about human customs, but she also seemed to grow more fascinated by James, often observing him with an intensity that made him uneasy. She asked questions about love, intimacy, and even the idea of procreation, topics that James didn't expect her to be so curious about. It was clear that their bond was deepening, and James couldn't help but wonder where this would lead. Would he be able to maintain the distance he had once hoped for? Or would he be drawn into something far more complicated and unexpected? The days that followed were a mix of fascination and confusion. Lyra seemed to grow more comfortable in her new life on Earth, but she continued to question everything about human emotions. The more she observed people around her, the more she wanted to understand why humans acted the way they did, especially when it came to relationships. James wasn't sure what to make of it. At first, he thought Lyra's questions were just part of her learning process, but as the weeks passed, her curiosity about human emotions seemed to deepen. She would often ask him about love, about connection, and about human bonds. These were things James had always taken for granted, never really questioning why people acted the way they did. One evening, as they sat together in the living room of their shared apartment, Lyra's voice broke the silence. James, I have been studying human behavior more, she said softly, her violet eyes focused on a book she was reading. There is something I do not understand. Why do humans seek affection from one another? Why do they need to be close to each other? James leaned back in his chair, unsure how to answer. Well, I guess it's because humans are social creatures, he said slowly. We find comfort in the presence of others. Being close to someone can make you feel understood, less alone. Lyra looked up from her book, her eyes searching his face. But does this closeness always mean something more? She asked. When you are close to someone, does it always lead to love? The question caught James off guard. He wasn't sure how to respond, but he tried his best to explain. It's not always the same for everyone, he said. Some people just enjoy being around others, while others may form deeper emotional connections. Love is different for everyone. It's not just about being close. It's about feeling understood, valued, and sometimes even needed. Lyra seemed to think about this for a long time. Her gaze drifted to the window, as though she were staring into a world she couldn't fully comprehend. I see, she said quietly, her voice almost like a whisper. But what if I don't understand those feelings? What if I don't feel them like you do? James hesitated. He knew that Lyra came from a very different culture, where emotions weren't experienced in the same way they were on Earth. It must have been confusing for her to try and grasp something so complex. It's okay if you don't understand it all right away, he said gently. It takes time to figure things out. You don't have to feel everything right now. Lyra's eyes met his, and for a brief moment James saw something in them, a flicker of vulnerability. "But I want to understand," she said earnestly. "I want to know why humans are so driven by these emotions. I want to know why love exists." James felt a pang in his chest. He didn't have all the answers, but he could see that Lyra's curiosity wasn't just intellectual anymore. She was searching for something deeper, something real. She wanted to connect, just like any human might. Over the next few days, their conversations grew more personal. Lyra would ask about James' past relationships, about his family, and about his hopes for the future. She listened intently, her violet eyes never leaving his face as he spoke. At first, James felt uncomfortable sharing so much with her, but as time passed, he began to feel a sense of trust. She wasn't just a foreign alien, she was a roommate, a companion, someone who genuinely wanted to understand. One evening after dinner, they were sitting together on the couch. Lyra had asked him about his first love, and as he spoke, he realized how much he had shared with her. "It's strange," he said, staring at the floor. "When I was with her, everything felt right. It felt like we were connected, like we understood each other on a level that was deeper than words." Lyra nodded, her eyes thoughtful. "I think I understand," she said softly. "I think I have felt something similar with you." James' heart skipped a beat at her words. He looked up at her, but her gaze was steady, almost calm. "You do?" he asked, his voice barely above a whisper. She nodded slowly. "Yes. I don't know what it is, but when I'm near you, I feel something. It's not the same as the emotions I read about. It's different, but it's real." James felt a wave of warmth spread through him, mixed with confusion. Could this be more than just curiosity on Lyra's part? Was she feeling something deeper, something that went beyond the academic interest she had shown before? "I don't know what to say," James admitted, his voice barely audible. "I've never had to explain love like this before. It's hard to put into words." Lyra turned toward him, her expression softening. "It is hard," she said, "but I want to understand. I want to know what it feels like, not just in theory, but in practice. I want to know what it means to be close to someone." James wasn't sure how to respond. He had never expected to be in this situation, living with an alien princess, sharing intimate conversations about emotions and connection. He had tried to keep his distance, but now he was beginning to wonder if that was even possible. Later that night, as they both sat quietly, Lyra spoke again. "James, I have been thinking, if humans form connections through closeness, through touch, would you be willing to show me what that means? Would you be willing to help me understand it better?" Her words hung in the air, and James felt a jolt of surprise. He had never expected her to ask something so direct, so personal. But there was something in her tone that made him hesitate, something in her eyes that made him unsure if he could refuse. Was this just curiosity? Or was Lyra's interest in him growing into something more? He opened his mouth to respond, but found himself at a loss for words. He didn't know what he was feeling. There was a part of him that wanted to pull away, to keep things simple and detached. But another part of him, one he couldn't ignore, wanted to be closer to her, to understand what this growing connection between them meant. I don't know," he said finally, his voice shaky. "It's complicated." Lyra studied him closely, as if trying to read his thoughts. "I understand," she said gently, "but I am willing to take the time to understand, to learn, if you are willing to help me." James felt the weight of her words settle in his chest. She wasn't asking for something casual. She was asking for a genuine connection, one that was difficult for her to understand, but she was willing to try. And that willingness, that desire to understand, made something stir inside him. For the first time, James realized that their bond was no longer just about curiosity or cultural exchange. It was about something deeper, something that neither of them fully understood yet, but that they were both willing to explore. He didn't know what would happen next, but one thing was certain. Lyra was no longer just an alien princess from another world. She was becoming something more to him, something he wasn't sure he could define just yet. The days grew warmer, and as spring settled in, James found himself becoming more aware of Lyra. The alien princess was no longer just a curious roommate or a stranger from another world. She had become a constant presence in his life. Every morning, she greeted him with a smile. Every evening, she sat by his side as they watched movies or discussed the differences between their worlds. And each day, the bond between them grew stronger. At first, James thought it was just a natural part of sharing a living space. But it wasn't just the friendship between them that was evolving, it was something more. Lyra was starting to ask more personal questions, probing into James' emotions, his past relationships, and even his dreams for the future. Her curiosity about human emotions was no longer just academic. It seemed like a deep desire to understand, to connect. One afternoon, they sat together in the small living room, the sun streaming through the windows. Lyra had her book open in front of her, but she wasn't reading. Her violet eyes were fixed on James, and she seemed lost in thought. "James," she said softly, breaking the silence. "I have been thinking a lot about what you said, about love and about connection." James looked up from his phone, his heart skipping a beat. "What about it?" "I think I understand it better now," Lyra said, her voice barely above a whisper. "I think I understand why humans seek closeness." James was curious. "You do?" She nodded slowly, her expression serious. "Yes, it is not just about physical proximity, is it? It is about something deeper, something that you feel with another person. Something that makes you feel whole." Her words lingered in the air, and James felt a pang of uncertainty in his chest. She wasn't wrong, but what did it mean? What was she really trying to say? Was she just theorizing, or was there more to it? "I guess so," he said, trying to keep his tone casual. "It's about feeling understood, feeling like you belong with someone." Lyra seemed to think about this for a moment, her gaze turning inward. "I think I understand now why it is so important to humans. Why they seek out connections and touch." James shifted uncomfortably. He had never really thought about it in those terms before, but he knew what Lyra was talking about. He'd experienced it himself. Moments when someone's touch, a shared glance, or just being close to someone made everything feel more right, more complete. But now, as Lyra spoke about it, he couldn't help but wonder if she was asking more than just an academic question. Could she really understand what he felt? Was she starting to feel something for him beyond the curiosity of a foreigner trying to understand human nature? "I think it's something you'll learn in time," James said quietly. "Love isn't always easy to understand, even for humans." Lyra met his gaze, her eyes searching his face. "But what if I already feel it?" she asked softly. "What if I already feel what you're talking about with you?" James' heart raced. He wasn't sure how to respond. He had always kept a distance from Lyra, trying to keep things platonic and professional, knowing that her position as an alien princess made their relationship complicated. But now, hearing her words, he realized that things had changed. Maybe they had changed a long time ago. "Lyra," he began, his voice shaky. I don't know if this is a good idea. You're still learning about human emotions, and I know," she interrupted, her voice gentle but firm. "I am still learning, but I feel something for you. I can't explain it. I don't understand it completely, but it is there. And I think you feel it too." James, breath caught in his throat. Was it true? Did he really feel something for Lyra? Of course, he had noticed her beauty, her intelligence, and the way she seemed to light up every room she entered. But was that enough to call it love? He wasn't sure, but the feelings swirling in his chest told him something had shifted between them. He looked at her, and for a moment, neither of them spoke. The air between them was thick with unspoken emotions, with the temptation to step closer, to give in to what seemed like an inevitable pull. "I think I'm starting to feel it too," James admitted quietly. "But we have to be careful. This is new territory for both of us." Lyra's eyes softened, and she reached out, placing her hand on his arm. "I know it is," she said, her voice soothing. "But sometimes you have to take risks. Sometimes you have to step into the unknown." Her touch sent a jolt of warmth through him, and James' heart raced again. He had always been cautious, but with Lyra, everything felt different. The way she looked at him, the way she tried so hard to understand human emotions, it all made him want to be closer to her, to share more than just words. "I don't want to hurt you," James said, his voice barely above a whisper. Lyra's hand lingered on his arm, her fingers gentle against his skin. "You won't hurt me, James," she said softly. "I trust you. I want to understand more. I want to feel what it means to be close to you, to experience what it's like to be with you." Her words were like a spark in the air, and James felt himself drawn to her, unable to resist the pull. For the first time since meeting her, he allowed himself to let go of the doubts, the fears, and the barriers he had built around himself. "I don't know if I'm ready for this," James admitted, his voice thick with emotion. "But maybe we can try, maybe we can see where this goes." Lyra smiled softly, and for a moment she seemed at peace. "I think that is all we can do." Over the next few days, their dynamic changed. There was still an air of uncertainty between them, but there was also something else, something that neither of them could ignore. James couldn't deny that he was beginning to feel a deeper connection to Lyra. He found himself drawn to her in ways he hadn't anticipated, and every time their eyes met, he felt his heart race a little faster. They began to spend more time together, talking about their lives, their hopes, and their fears. Lyra, once the distant and mysterious alien princess, was now someone James could confide in. She listened to him, truly listened, and in return, he started to understand her in ways that went beyond surface-level curiosity. She wasn't just an alien. She was someone who wanted to connect, to understand, and to experience emotions just like he did. But as their relationship grew, so did the temptation to cross the line. James found himself thinking about Lyra more and more, imagining what it would be like to be close to her, to share something deeper than just words. The idea of intimacy, of touching her, became harder to ignore. It was in one of these quiet moments late at night when they were both sitting on the couch that Lyra spoke again. "James," she said softly, her voice almost shy. "What would it feel like to be close to someone, to feel everything that you said? The connection, the warmth." James' heart skipped a beat. He wasn't sure how to answer. The question hung in the air, heavy with the weight of unspoken desires. He had always kept his distance, but now, with Lyra so close, he didn't know if he could anymore. "I don't know," he said, his voice strained. "But maybe we should find out together." And in that moment, with the world outside silent and still, the temptation was no longer something he could push away. It was right there between them, undeniable and strong. The connection they shared was real, and no matter how complicated it seemed, they both knew that there was no going back. The days that followed felt different for both James and Lyra. What had once been a tentative curiosity between them had evolved into something deeper, more complex. The quiet moments they spent together, the soft conversations and long silences, began to feel more meaningful. Neither of them had expected things to develop the way they had, but now they found themselves at a crossroad, unable to ignore the feelings stirring within them. One afternoon, as the sun began to set, Lyra sat by the window, staring out at the city's skyline. The light from the setting sun cast a golden glow across her face, and James couldn't help but notice how peaceful she looked. There was something serene about her, but also a quiet tension that James could feel in the air. He walked over and sat down beside her, careful not to invade her space too much. "What are you thinking about?" he asked gently, his voice soft but filled with curiosity. Lyra turned her head to face him, her violet eyes meeting his. "I've been thinking about what you said. About love and about connection. I think I understand it more now, but there's still so much I don't know. I don't know if I fully understand what it means to be with someone, to experience the things you humans talk about." James felt a lump form in his throat. He had known this moment would come, but he hadn't realized how much it would affect him. Lyra had come a long way in understanding human emotions, but now it was clear that there was a gap between what she had read and what she had felt. She wasn't asking for theory anymore. She was asking for something real, something deeper. "I think," James began slowly, choosing his words carefully, "that it's something you have to experience. It's not just something you can understand by reading about it. You have to feel it for yourself. And sometimes that means taking risks." Lyra's expression softened. She seemed to be processing his words carefully, the weight of his meaning settling on her. "Taking risks," she repeated quietly. "I've never been one to take risks. In my world, we are taught to be calculated, to think before we act. But here, with you, I feel something that makes me want to be closer, to understand more." James felt his heart race, the tension between them building. There it was again, the pull, the desire for closeness. It wasn't just curiosity anymore. It was something stronger, something neither of them could ignore. He could feel the warmth of her presence, and yet he hesitated. He knew they were treading into uncertain waters. If they took that step, it would change everything. "I want to understand it too," James said quietly, his voice barely above a whisper. "But I don't know if we're ready for that, if you're ready for that." Lyra looked at him intently, her violet eyes never leaving his face. "What does it mean to be ready?" she asked, her voice tinged with a quiet urgency. "Is there ever a perfect time to feel something, to be close to someone?" James swallowed, unsure of how to answer. He had never had to think about love or connection in such a way before. He had always approached relationships with caution, with the knowledge that there was risk involved. But now, with Lyra, it felt different. It felt inevitable. But was it wise to act on it? Was it fair to either of them? I don't know, James admitted, his voice filled with uncertainty. I just don't want to hurt you. I don't want to do something that changes everything between us, something we can't take back. Lyra seemed to understand his hesitation. She reached out and placed her hand on his, her touch gentle but firm. James, she said softly, I trust you. I trust that whatever happens, we will figure it out together. I'm not afraid of change. I'm afraid of not trying, of not understanding. Her words were like a quiet reassurance, and for a moment, James felt the walls around his heart begin to crack. He had always been afraid of the unknown, afraid of losing control. But with Lyra, he felt something different, a sense of openness, of possibility. She was offering him something that was both frightening and exciting, the chance to explore a connection with her that was beyond what either of them could have expected. Maybe you're right, James said quietly, his thumb gently brushing against her hand. Maybe we need to take that step. Maybe it's the only way to truly understand what this is between us. Lyra smiled softly, her eyes shining with a quiet understanding. Then let's take it together, she said, her voice filled with warmth. Let's see where it leads. And just like that, the decision was made. They didn't have all the answers, but they were ready to explore what was between them. They had come to a crossroads, and instead of staying in place, they had chosen to move forward together. The next few days were filled with a quiet anticipation. James couldn't shake the feeling that everything had shifted between him and Lyra. There were no more barriers between them, no more walls keeping them apart. Every glance, every touch felt charged with possibility, and it was both thrilling and terrifying. They spent more time together than ever before. James showed Lyra more about human customs, how people expressed affection, how they cared for one another. Lyra, in turn, shared more about her world, her upbringing, and the unique perspective she had on the universe. Their conversations deepened, their bond growing stronger with each passing day. But even as their connection strengthened, there was still the unspoken question of what would happen next. Would they stay in this uncertain space forever, feeling something they couldn't fully name? Or would they finally take the next step and explore what their feelings truly meant? One evening, after a quiet dinner, Lyra turned to James with a serious expression. James, she said softly, her voice filled with a mix of hope and uncertainty. I know we've talked about this before, but I want to be clear. I want to experience what it means to be close to you, to feel what it's like to be with you in every way. James' heart pounded in his chest. He had known this was coming, but hearing her say it aloud made it real. He wasn't sure if he was ready to take that step, but the thought of walking away from this connection was even harder to bear. I think I want that too, he said, his voice shaky with emotion. But we have to be sure, this isn't just about what we feel in the moment, it's about the long term, it's about what comes after. Lyra nodded, understanding the weight of his words. I know, she said quietly. But I believe that whatever comes after, we will face it together. And in that moment, James knew that this was the moment of truth. They were standing on the edge of something new, something that neither of them could fully understand, but something they were both willing to explore. Together, James repeated softly, his hand gently brushing Lyra's cheek. Let's take this step together. The world outside seemed to fade away as they sat in the stillness, the only sound the steady beat of their hearts. They didn't know what the future held, but in that moment it didn't matter. All that mattered was that they were ready to face it, hand in hand. The days after their conversation felt different, heavier in a way, as if the decision they had made to move forward together had changed the very air around them. Every glance between James and Lyra seemed charged with anticipation, with the understanding that they were about to take a step that could not be undone. There was no turning back now, but neither of them seemed to want to. James had always been someone who measured his steps carefully, who took time to think things through. But now, with Lyra, everything felt different. He didn't need to overthink things. He didn't need to be afraid of what might come next. It was as if they were both learning how to trust each other and themselves in a way they never had before. It was a week later, as they sat in their living room, that the tension between them reached its peak. The soft glow of the lamp beside them cast a warm light on Lyra's face, and for a moment, James found himself lost in her eyes, the deep violet color that seemed to hold a universe of questions, of things she wanted to understand, of emotions she wanted to experience. James, Lyra said, her voice quiet but firm, I have thought a lot about this, about us, about what we want. James felt his heart skip a beat. He had known this conversation was coming, but hearing her say it aloud made everything feel more real. "I've thought about it too," he replied, his voice slightly unsteady, "and I think I'm ready." Lyra nodded slowly, as if she had expected this answer, but still, a glimmer of uncertainty flashed in her eyes. "I want to experience this with you. I want to understand what it feels like to be close to you, to share something real." James's breath caught in his throat. Her words, her openness, made everything feel both exhilarating and terrifying at the same time. He had been so careful, so cautious, not wanting to rush into something that could complicate their relationship. But now, hearing her speak so honestly about what she wanted, he knew that he couldn't hold back anymore. "I want that too," he said, his voice low and steady. "But we need to be sure. We can't just rush into something like this without knowing what it means, what it will change between us." Lyra's gaze softened, and she reached out to gently touch his hand. "I think I understand," she said quietly. "But James, sometimes the only way to truly understand something is to experience it, to take that step together." Her words resonated with him. He had always been someone who feared the unknown, but now, in this moment with Lyra, the unknown didn't seem as frightening. It seemed like the next step in their journey together, a journey neither of them fully understood but were willing to explore. For a moment, they both sat in silence, the only sound between them the soft ticking of the clock on the wall. The room felt so still, so peaceful, as if the world outside had faded away and all that mattered was the connection between them. "Are you sure about this?" James asked, his voice almost a whisper. "Because once we take that step, things will change. They won't go back to the way they were." Lyra met his gaze with a calm certainty. "I am sure," she said, her voice strong but gentle. "I trust you. I trust that whatever happens, we will face it together." James nodded, feeling a sense of peace wash over him. She was right. They couldn't go back, but maybe that was what they both needed, to step forward into the unknown, to take a chance on each other. He reached out and took her hand in his, feeling the warmth of her touch, the soft pressure of her fingers. For a moment, everything else seemed to disappear, the worries, the doubts, the fears. All that mattered was the connection between them, the trust they had built, and the path they had chosen to walk together. "I'm ready," he said softly. "Let's take that step." Lyra smiled, a soft, understanding smile, and she moved closer to him. The space between them seemed to disappear as she leaned in, her face just inches from his. Her breath was warm against his skin, and James felt his heart race as their eyes locked. This moment, this quiet, intimate moment, felt like everything had led to this. Lyra's fingers brushed against his cheek, a gentle touch that sent a shiver down his spine. It was like nothing he had ever felt before, a sense of closeness that went beyond the physical, a feeling of connection that reached deep into his soul. And then, without another word, she closed the distance between them. Her lips met his, soft and tentative at first, as if she were still learning what it meant to kiss, to be close in this way. But James responded with the same tenderness, his hand moving to gently cup her face as he deepened the kiss, feeling the warmth of her lips against his, the soft press of her body against his own. For a moment, time seemed to stand still. It was just the two of them in this small apartment, sharing something that was both simple and profound. It was a kiss, but it was more than that. It was an exchange of trust, of understanding, of everything they had been building between them. As the kiss ended, they both pulled away slowly, their foreheads resting against each other. James could feel his heart pounding in his chest, and he knew that this was just the beginning. This was the moment where everything changed, where they truly began to understand each other, to connect in a way they hadn't before. "Are you okay?" James asked, his voice soft, his hand still resting gently on her cheek. Lyra smiled, a small, peaceful smile that made his heart skip a beat. "I'm more than okay," she said, her voice filled with a quiet joy. "I think I finally understand what it means to be close to someone, to share a bond that goes beyond just words." James felt a sense of relief wash over him. He had been worried about what would happen after this moment, but now, with Lyra by his side, he realized that they were ready for whatever came next. They didn't need all the answers right now. They just needed each other, and that was enough. In the days that followed, James and Lyra continued to explore their connection. They didn't rush into anything, but they allowed themselves to be vulnerable, to trust each other in ways they hadn't before. They spent their time talking, laughing, and sharing their hopes and fears, building something real and beautiful between them. As the weeks passed, their relationship deepened. Lyra began to understand more about human emotions, about love and intimacy, but she also taught James something important, that sometimes the most meaningful connections don't need to be fully understood. Sometimes they just need to be felt. And in that feeling, James and Lyra found something extraordinary. They found a bond that went beyond the physical, beyond the cultural differences, beyond the fear of the unknown. They found something that was uniquely theirs, a connection that was built on trust, vulnerability, and a willingness to embrace the unknown together. The future was still uncertain, but for the first time, James didn't feel afraid. He felt ready. Ready to face whatever came next, with Lyra by his side.